Thank you so much for joining me today. We are going to talk about the next generation. So we're going to crack the code of the youths, the millennials.
Just today, only today.
Yeah. So we've heard a lot of great success stories, and we want to know now how the next generation is thinking about things differently. So I want to get to both of your stories, obviously, but can we start with Social Impact 360? Give us a brief overview of how it was conceived,
Sure.
and then we'll get into where it's going.
Sure. So Social Impact 360 is the only youth-led movement for business for good nationwide. So we actually operate out of colleges across the country. We have 15 chapters, and we have 1,000 alums that are both building their own social enterprises and are working within corporate America for social good. So this is a group of young people that actually started with 2 college students at Georgetown University who really thought, I don't understand why I have to go into business or why I have to go into nonprofit work. Why can't I both do well and do good? And why can't I build businesses that solve social issues and do both at the same time? So they created their own curriculum and they started training their peers. And it grew into a grassroots movement, and it became sort of a dead poet society for social entrepreneurs and for folks who thought that business could be used for good. And so to this day, it is still completely youth-led, and it is a youth-led movement. I'm the oldest person in the organization.
And you have chapters all over the country. How many are there now?
So there are 15. We're growing to 20, and we're working on international chapters now.
And all based at colleges?
Yes, based at colleges across the country, and then, as I said, our alums are at your Google, your Tesla, your Deloitte, middle management now, all young people who have a similar like-minded view of what the vision and the future of business should be.
Awesome. And if you could conjure one example of an alum who might be even present at the moment,
Other than Adrian.
what's an example? Oh, yeah. Yeah, so Adrian, how did you come to Social Impact 360?
So when I entered university, I came with the dream of bridging theory and practice. And it happened that Social Impact 360's original pitch, original advertisement video, actually used that exact phrasing. It depicted a student who was starved of meaning in his studies. They went to class, they did their homework, and that was it. And that student I very much felt represented what I wanted out of my college experience. And so I saw that ad, I was completely sold, and I thought immediately, how do I get my way into this organization? It's by application, and so I was fortunate enough that they picked me, and I went on to be extremely involved since I was 18 years old, and I'm 24 now.
And you were at Stanford at the time?
I was at Stanford,
Was
yes.
there a chapter there already? Or?
Yes, well, there was there was one of the original 15 chapters, and that chapter is no longer active. We've had a lot of, there's been a huge renaissance in social impact work at Stanford, and it's become a very crowded space. But certainly, Compass facilitated that on-ramp towards those initiatives.
And Allison has described you as sort of the best example of exactly what would be ideal for people who come in through Social Impact 360 to become, and what you can do through the program. So can you tell us a little about your work?
Allison does always really flatter me. And I think that the reason why she might choose me as that example is because I work from a place of extreme familiarity. I work from a place even of intimacy. I am legally blind myself. I was born with malformed eyes, so I suffered a retinal detachment as an infant, and then developed a coloboma also congenitally, and so my vision is extremely limited. I was also born in a country called El Salvador, which didn't have many resources to educate people who were visually impaired. This challenge, this obstacle, led my family to come to America, where we searched through many schools, so we've also found a district that was willing to equip me with technology, to give me an opportunity to function in mainstream education with the assistance of technology. And so my work now deals in applying technology to people so they can be enabled, whether that's for vocation, whether that's for creation, self-expression. These are the things that technology can really give to someone who otherwise has some sort of disability.
And I think we have an image that you have a little story about. Can we pull that up?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So blindness is a puzzle, like most things in life. And I differentiate a puzzle from a problem with the notion that a puzzle has all the pieces you need to solve it, right? It's a matter of performing the right operations in the right order. And in fact, that is the landscape of disability in 2018. Given the technology that we have, given the connectedness that we all share, we are uniquely equipped right now, this generation, to solve entire classes of problems that previous generations considered to be completely immutable, things that would not change, things that would always be bad things. And so this picture represents me teaching one of my students, thanks to the help of a teacher assistant of mine named Danny Lucas. She and I co-designed this Rubik's Cube to be tactile, and we taught computer science to students in Thailand who were completely blind with the goal of making a social statement. It happens that in the world, the blind are not considered to have any degree of intellectual vitality. The vast majority of the blind actually live in poverty. 150 years ago, the notion of educating a blind person was hearsay. In fact, even 200, 300 years ago, it was philosophically contentious whether or not a person could learn without sight. However, this humanitarian crisis is completely solvable. And we wanted to prove that someone who's visually impaired can model and demonstrate knowledge of computer programming by performing a set of algorithms on the cube, which ultimately leads to its solution, in terms of the core concepts that make up the composition of code. And so that's what you see there.
And it sounds like, so your line of work is really informed by your blindness and how you're helping to recognize this disparity and rectify the disparities in employment opportunities among blind people. I mean, how do you see that? How did you conceptualize that, which might be seen as a disability, and turn it into a strength?
Absolutely. So for people who knew me at a young age, the notion that I ended up at Stanford is laughable, really, completely unrealistic. I did not start in an honors program. I did not go through a facility for gifted children. I was always placed at the lowest rung. And so those experiences ultimately led to some sort of self-conception, right, where you sort of idealize yourself in terms of society's frame. And as I got older and became more curious and started to try to dedicate more of myself to my studies, I just kept uncovering more and more layers of potential, more and more layers of ability. And then one day I got a phone call from Sonia Smith, who's now a dean of admissions at Princeton, who was at the time at Stanford, saying, "We have admitted you unanimously and we hope you'll come." And that came from me basically being a remedial student. I mean, of course, at the time I had taken on honors courses, but really that was not my upbringing. That was not how I was presented to the world. I was born in a place where those things just don't really happen, and the way I came into the system, nothing led to that. And that affirmation was the proof I needed that it wasn't about me. My takeaway wasn't that I happen to be special or that I happen to be gifted in a particular way. It happens that there's just a lot of uncovered ability in the world. And the ways through which we can uncover it are not so difficult. It's really a matter of imagination.
And so, Allison, do you think that's part of the way that the next generation is conceptualizing opportunity in entrepreneurship, is that what might have been seen as a disability or something that would make someone not as competitive is turned into a strength and is seen as a way of informing and thinking about new ways to solve problems? I don't want to put words into your head, but how does that play out across the organization?
I think that's absolutely correct. I think what's so unique about watching the young people of Social Impact 360 and how we operate around the country is, we allow people and young people who don't have resources, who don't come from places of privilege, to have access to our curriculum. And they are able to work on areas of passion and meaning to them. What is important for you to solve? What have you experienced in your life that you think needs solving? And I think that has allowed young people to come up with solutions to problems that are both very intimate to them, that are very important. And it's actually, in my frank opinion, coming up with much better solutions. I've never seen really an organization where young people of that talent and that caliber who have not had access to resources to be able to rise to that level to solve problems that they've been intimately involved with. So as you'll see with Adrian, and I don't want to talk too much about what Adrian does because I want him to talk about himself, but Adrian is creating an organization called Group Theory, and they are essentially empowering the blind through technology, and he is creating transformative technology that will allow them to become computer programmers. That's something you would never see or think about in the past, but because Adrian has that experience, right, and because he has the training of going through the program and understanding how to build those businesses and find those solutions, he is able to create that and to create those solutions that were never available before. And I don't see that from a generation prior, and I see that being incredibly important to this generation.
And do you think people are reconceptualizing it not as giving opportunities in a way that's charitable or in a way that is lending a helping hand, but is actually seen as we have a diverse population of really unique people with unique ways of seeing the world and solving problems, and this is good for us to think outside of the conceptual box of what
I think it has to happen.
Okay.
In order to solve these problems. And I don't think that that's ever occurred, but I think what's even more fascinating about it is that they're doing it in a business structure. And we really haven't seen that before. So how do I create a business that solves a social issue? And the actual market from that comes from solving that issue, which Adrian's organization does. And that really changes the game, right? Because important work should not just be charitable, right? Why can't we solve important problems and that be valuable? And Adrian's organization is proving that, and the young people in our organization are proving that. And on a larger level, we're looking at, for our alumni, how do we even train our alumni and work with companies and employees out there so that they can themselves think of business in a completely different way? I mean, I see them as changing the future of business and how it operates and how we address social issues. So how can I, as a business, look at my policies, my practices, and make sure that they're both meeting the bottom line and they're also solving social good? Because I think what this generation really represents is that those are not mutually exclusive and that they are finding ways to do both. And I think it's incredibly powerful.
Okay. So it's not just a generation of socialists who want to burn everything down.
Absolutely not. I think there's so many misconceptions about this generation. I think they're brilliant. I work with them every day. I think they're so smart. I think what they are doing seems counterintuitive to those who have been working under perhaps a bottom line only mentality, because that is safe and that has worked in the past. And what we are seeing and what we are proving, and what Adrian and other young people are proving, is that this model also works. And it is both fulfilling and meaningful and powerful, and also drives tremendous outcomes.
Okay, question for both of you, whoever wants to field it, is how much does this rely on consumer motivation to give their business to socially conscious organizations and to decide to do this versus how much is the company actually able to?
Therein lies the problem, in my opinion, where companies today are basically marketing social impact, right? It's essentially becoming a branding strategy. And very much in most of these models, it's the company that benefits disproportionate to whoever they claim to be empowering, right? And I'm not saying it's not a step in the right direction, it certainly is, but I think that the emergence of new social models will not come from a company that makes a shoe and gives a shoe, or a company that buys grapes from someone who could really use a break. In fact, I think that the next generation of business will be finding ways to educate people who are currently disadvantaged so that they can achieve self-determination. If we can find ways for people who we consider to be disenfranchised or who are disenfranchised to create industry, to be industrious, and they themselves create product that is inherently valuable, then we will enable a new class of people. Otherwise, the money will remain trapped within the organizations that need the least amount of help.
Okay, so it's not about relying on a consumer to say pay extra for a Patagonia jacket because they know that it's a socially conscious company, but actually just making the best jacket, the most affordable, the most accessible, and then also having that company be socially conscious.
Exactly. So like in the case of group theory, we create vocational technologies. We create new methods of programming a computer that are accessible to anyone. They're built from the ground up for a non-sighted user, but any user could do it a lot easier. And so what does that give rise to? One option is we saw that service, that system itself, right? However, it's an inherent, the cause of creating such a system is inherently social. There's inherently social value to democratizing creativity in the digital space. However, when we sat down and we started to think, okay, how do we fund this? How do we actually bring this to fruition? Well, the first thing that occurred to us, okay, well, we could spend a lifetime campaigning, trying to get people wealthier than us to give us money. However, none of us, had that much influence. And so the obvious answer was, digital products are extremely valuable. Most businesses hinge on their website, for instance. And if instead of selling the system, if we can instead use the system as an internal tool of a company that creates valuable products through a process created for people who need work, then all of a sudden we are selling a valuable product and teaching people to create those valuable products.
So I want to turn to audience questions in just a moment, but did you want to respond to anything in there, Allison?
Sure. I agree with what Adrian said, and I think that it really is taking a different lens, right? We are teaching young people and kind of pushing them to the place where we're saying, no, you need to solve the solution in a way that where the value to the market is inherent. And that way, this isn't a question of whether it's business or social good, it's both. And I think we're pushing the business sector to that place too, by building the first service corps in the business sector in history that's dedicated to helping companies become more socially responsible. So our alumni are being trained by social experts across the country in business and CSR and social impact, and we'll actually be helping companies to make that transition. And so I think it's not about either or, it's about a new revolutionary way to look at what business is, and it's important both for the social sector and for the business sector, and it's actually where both need to move to gain purpose and also sustainability.
Is this the inevitable future, or, I mean, what would stop it? How do we, what would turn the tide back toward just like maximizing profit for shareholders and that's it?
What would stop it? I don't see it being stopped because I see a group of young people who are determined to see something better and know that it's possible. And I do think that that is what's needed.
Yeah, people do talk a lot about, inevitability in the future, right?
Yeah.
As if we're all hurling towards some outcome. And we are. We absolutely are, right? Like no single person can stop anything, right? At least like when that thing happens to be a trend, like a collection of effort. And one thing Allison and I talk a lot about is, how this generation seems to be more empathetic in a lot of ways, right? If you look at all the social causes, the fact that there exists an organization called Social Impact 360 and that the Atlantic magazine has them on stage talking to you all is a testament to how times are changing. And in my opinion, what has enabled a lot of that change is actually the connectedness of the world given the internet, right? It used to be that culture in itself was an extremely inaccessible thing, right? Let's say you lived in a neighborhood with a culture. If you wanted to experience another culture, you had to physically go somewhere, right? And you still do. But at the same time, you can lubricate the process of engaging with more cultures by consuming media. And we are all aware of each other more than we've ever been. And that is not a bad thing. That is a good thing. It's not an easy thing. There will be a lot of hardship, but it will inevitably lead to a confluence of solutions and an emergence of leadership where never would have otherwise come.
And I would say that's actually the one place where, I agree with Adrian, but it's not where I see this being the need, but I agree. I see the convergence of, I hear from alumni across the country and they call me every day and they tell me if they're in the for-profit sector, it's a similar story. They say, I like my job, I'm happy, I'm making a decent amount of money, but I miss meaning and purpose in my work. And they say, can I go into the social impact sector? And I say there's about 100 jobs in the social impact sector. It's a brand new sector. So not for another probably 10 years will there be enough jobs for me to give you. I said, so what can I do for you now to give you meaning and purpose in that sector that you're in? Because in the nonprofit sector, we've got meaning and purpose everywhere, right? You're there for that. But in the nonprofit sector, when I worked in the nonprofit sector for a long time, you've got people who are working on important issues who can't pay their bills, frankly, can barely pay their bills. They're eating beans out of cans to be able to do the work that they're doing. And they need money to do important work. They can't scale. And sustainably, asking for donations all the time just is not, it's not sustainable. And so what I'm trying to say is I think both sectors need each other. And I think that need is driving a lot of where we're moving to and why we're ending up in that place. And I think technology plays a role in that. But I do think that you're seeing that need come out, and that's why we're moving to this place.
As a journalist, I just want to say that canned beans can be quite nutritious and tasty.
as a journalist or as a doctor?
Can I think we have an opportunity here for a question from the audience. So what am I not asking, or what would you like to follow up on what's been said? It's very difficult for me to see, but I'll trust that someone with a microphone will come around.
Yeah, if not,
okay.
One thing I think is interesting to consider is the previous generation and the social impact they had, right? And not in terms of what they meant to do and what they did, but just what happened. And so I like to liken what we're doing as to what McDonald's did, where if you consider the amount of jobs McDonald's created, right? It's inordinate. It was unprecedented, right? For a company to have that many locations. And while the product that McDonald's creates is, not necessarily good for society, access to food quickly is good for society. But what they've actually done, the most enduring legacy is the number of jobs they've created, right? McDonald's is America's first job. And that's a really good thing. However, it happens that we can do better, right? I think that we can take that lesson from McDonald's, right? Where a business that creates jobs is good. And it happens that the products that we have yet to create, or the processes for creating products that we've yet to create, the optimizations that we've yet to discover, which is what led the food industry into what it is now, right? It's retail and the food industry, right? They have both optimized selling and serving food. There are still a lot more industries left to be optimized. There are still a lot of products that you right now would pay thousands of dollars for, where if we just created the right technology and the right process, right? Not automation, not necessarily robotics or artificial intelligence, but if we equip the right people with the right tools, we can all get better products for a lot less money and make a lot more jobs at the same time. McDonald's did that for the cheeseburger, but I would like to openly challenge everyone who has a business to do that to whatever they're doing right now.
Yeah, I think a lot of people would argue that there's a lot of ground to be gained improving the food industry as well, even for as much as progress as we've made in this country. Closing thoughts, Allison?
Sure. I think that, Adrian, just to speak a little bit more too about what he is working on with group theory, I think it's just a testament, right? It is understanding that by training this group of young people who previously did not have access to these tools, he is going to give them livable wage jobs, not just livable wage, high wage jobs that will enable them to come out of poverty. And that is not charitable, right? That is all through business. And the products that he is selling from his business are just as you would at any business that you would be selling, are going to make that business money. And I think what these young people are doing is revolutionary in terms of the model that we are building and the model that we're seeing across the country. And I think the idea that we can teach businesses that are already operating to act in a social enterprise model is where we're heading with the Service Corps. And I think it's going to create a new future of business. And I am unbelievably excited about it and what these young people are doing.
Thank you both so much, Allison and Adrian. Thank you all.